The stars above Earth had never looked so calm. For years they had watched in silence as the planet below healed from wars, rebuilt its cities, and finally turned its eyes toward the heavens again. It wasn't a story about victory or revenge, and it was about survival. Humanity had been through centuries of struggle, but in the quiet shadows of space, something extraordinary was being built. Far above the blue planet, orbiting in complete secrecy, floated a massive construction ring, so large that it could be seen from the night side of the moon if you knew exactly where to look. Inside that ring, surrounded by millions of tons of steel and light, engineers and workers labored day and night. They didn't speak loudly about what they were making. Even among themselves, they called it simply the project. The work had gone on for decades. It started after the last global crisis when Earth almost tore itself apart for the final time. Governments collapsed, economies crumbled, and for a while it felt like humanity might never recover. But somehow, against all odds, people came together. They stopped thinking as separate nations and started thinking as one species. It was the first time in human history that Earth truly united for something bigger than politics. Survival in the universe. Rumors spread among the workers. Some said the ship they were building could fly faster than light. Others believed it could travel beyond known galaxies. A few even whispered that it wasn't just a ship. It was a message to the rest of the universe. A declaration that humans were no longer a fragile, fearful species hiding on a single planet. Every bolt tightened. Every circuit connected carried a story. Some workers were veterans of old wars who now wanted peace. Others were scientists who had lost faith in governments but found new hope in humanity itself. Many were ordinary people, technicians, welders, programmers, who didn't see themselves as heroes but knew they were part of something that would outlive them. They didn't build for glory. They built because they believed Earth deserved a second chance, a chance to be seen, to be respected, to stand tall among the stars. The ship took shape slowly. It began as a skeleton of steel, a floating frame so large it could cast a shadow on entire space stations. As years passed, its body gleamed silver under the sun. Huge panels were added, energy cores installed, and layers of shielding welded into place. The more it grew, the more people realized it wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol of everything humanity had become. On the ground, people could feel something changing. The world's old borders had started fading. Scientists from countries that once refused to talk now worked side by side. Former enemies shared coffee breaks and ideas. Humanity had found its purpose, not in fighting one another, but in reaching the stars together. The ship had a heart, a living one in a way. Deep inside it, engineers had placed an energy core unlike anything ever built. It didn't rely on nuclear fusion or antimatter like older engines. This one was something new, something experimental, born from a fusion of human science and strange data recovered from deep space. That discovery, made decades ago, had been kept secret from the world. It came from an object that fell near Saturn, something not entirely human in origin. Scientists never found out who made it, but they learned from it, and that knowledge became the core of the project. Some said the ship's heart pulsed faintly like it was alive. When power surged through its systems, light rippled across the hull in waves of blue and gold. Engineers joked that the ship was breathing. But deep down, everyone who saw it felt the same quiet awe, as if they were standing before something sacred. Despite the secrecy, whispers spread beyond Earth. Other civilizations had been watching. The galaxy was far from empty. For centuries, humans had picked up strange signals and cosmic messages that hinted they were not alone, and those others, distant, ancient, and powerful, saw the energy signatures coming from Earth and began to wonder what the humans were doing. In the past, those civilizations had never feared humanity. They saw Earth as young, chaotic, unrefined, and a world too new to matter. But now the readings from Sol were different. Something massive was being built, something that was bending gravity and space-time itself. Inside the shipyard, the final pieces were coming together. The engineers worked in silence, some with tears in their eyes as the last plates were welded shut. They knew they were witnessing the end of an era, and the beginning of something that would change everything. One night, as Earth rotated beneath them, the planet shone blue and bright through the shipyard's windows. The workers gathered in silence to watch as the lights of cities sparkled below. tiny dots of life that had endured centuries of struggle. Someone said quietly, "We did this for them." No one replied. They just stood there watching the world they had built this for. The day of activation drew near. The world below buzzed with quiet anticipation, though most people didn't truly know what was happening. The project had many code names. Some called it Dawnstar, others named it the Ark. But officially it was known by one name, Eidolon Ascendant. That name carried meaning. Eidolon, a word from ancient language meaning phantom, spirit, or echo. Ascendant, rising, transcending. Together it symbolized humanity's rise from the shadows of its own past. When the main power systems were tested for the first time, the whole station trembled. Instruments flickered. Even the Earth's magnetic field reacted faintly to the energy pulse. Scientists monitoring from below stared in disbelief. The readings showed a pattern unlike any natural force known to physics. It was as if the ship was resonating with something unseen, something cosmic. For the people working closest to it, that moment changed everything. One of the senior engineers, who had given 20 years of his life to the project, simply sat down and whispered, "It's alive." Others laughed nervously, but deep inside, no one disagreed. The ship's completion wasn't celebrated with fireworks or public parades. It wasn't even officially announced. Humanity didn't need to shout this to the galaxy because soon the galaxy would feel it. On the surface, life went on as normal. Children went to school, markets stayed open, families gathered for dinner. But somewhere up there, floating silently above Earth, humanity's greatest creation waited. It didn't carry weapons for destruction, it carried potential. It carried proof that humans could do the impossible. Every person who had worked on it left a piece of themselves behind. Some wrote their names inside the panels hidden deep within the walls. Others left personal notes sealed forever in the structure. Messages to whoever would one day walk those corridors. "We were here," one note said. "We believed in something greater." The launch date was finally chosen. No one outside the highest command knew when it would happen, but the world seemed to sense it anyway, as if something deep within human instinct could feel that history was about to shift. On the last night before activation, a small group of engineers floated near the ship's hull, looking at the reflection of Earth in its surface. The planet glowed beneath them, fragile yet beautiful. "This isn't just our ship," one of them said quietly. "It's Earth's heartbeat." Below, a faint aurora shimmered across the poles, glowing like the planet was smiling. In that moment, they knew the long silence was almost over. Humanity had built many things before, cities, weapons, wonders, but nothing like this. And as the ship drifted in the darkness, waiting for its engines to awaken, the stars seemed to pause. Somewhere across the galaxy, alien sensors flickered to life, picking up strange distortions from the edge of the Sol system. Reports were sent. Scientists argued, but none of them understood what was coming. They would soon. Because when the Eidolon Ascendant finally came to life, it would not just launch into space, it would send waves through the heavens themselves. And for the first time in history, the universe would turn its gaze toward Earth, not with pity or curiosity, but with awe. The launch of Earth's greatest ship had not yet been announced to the world, but its echoes were already spreading far beyond the solar system. What happened inside that silent orbit above Earth had not gone unnoticed. The universe had ears, and in the deep, dark corners of space, someone was always listening. For months, small, strange energy ripples began appearing on alien sensors across nearby sectors. The readings were faint at first and harmless, almost invisible, but then they grew stronger, spreading through the interstellar networks like whispers carried by the wind. Out on the edge of the Orion Arm, at a research outpost owned by one of the older civilizations, the first reports came in. Unregistered energy signature detected from Sol system, their instruments recorded. Scientists there stared at the data in silence. It was unlike anything they had ever seen from a young race like humanity. Normally, Earth signals were easy to read. Slow radio waves, scattered beacons, ordinary transmissions from a developing species. But this was different. The energy burst that reached them was pure and structured, almost mathematical in its pattern, like the heartbeat of something enormous and alive. At first, no one took it seriously. Across the galaxy, many still saw humans as an unpredictable but harmless species, clever with machines, emotional, always fighting, but not truly advanced. They were known for curiosity, art, and stubbornness, not power. Most galactic civilizations thought Earth was still centuries away from becoming anything meaningful in the grand scheme of things. But that opinion began to change. Slowly, uneasily. In the halls of alien governments, secret meetings were held. The readings from Sol were verified again and again. It wasn't a natural event. Something was being built, something massive enough to bend gravity and send ripples across space. For a species as young as humanity, it shouldn't have been possible. One of the older empires, known for its cautious diplomacy, tried to dismiss the rumors. "It's just another human experiment," their leader said during a meeting. "They play with fire and call it progress." But not everyone agreed. Another race, one that had watched Earth closely since the early days of space travel, argued otherwise. "You don't understand humans," one of their observers said quietly. "They don't stop. When they fail, they start again. When they fall, they rise higher. They don't give up, and that's what makes them dangerous." While alien worlds argued and speculated, on Earth life went on as usual. Ordinary people had no idea that far across the stars, entire governments were now talking about them. Humanity, still grounded by everyday life, didn't realize that it had just become the center of the galaxy's attention. Inside the solar system, things began to stir. Unmarked probes appeared at the outer edge of Pluto's orbit, scanning in silence. Their sleek bodies reflected faint starlight as they gathered information and sent it back to their creators light years away. Humanity didn't notice, at least not right away. But inside Earth's deep space monitoring stations, a few operators began picking up unusual readings. "Unidentified objects holding position," one of them reported. The data was quickly classified, hidden from the public. The higher authorities already knew. They had expected it, after all. When you build something powerful enough to shake the stars, it's impossible to stay hidden for long. Meanwhile, on dozens of alien worlds, scientists were trying to make sense of what Earth had done. The calculations were terrifying. The energy readings from the Sol system matched the kind of output only seen in the engines of ancient star civilizations, ones that had disappeared long ago. How could a young planet barely 1,000 years into space travel create something like that? Some thought humanity had found an artifact from a long-dead race. Others believed humans were experimenting with forces they couldn't control. A few even feared that Earth had made contact with something beyond normal space. Something dangerous. The news began to leak through interstellar channels. Traders spoke in hushed tones about a new human supership. Explorers heading near human space returned with strange stories. They said Earth had built a vessel so massive it could eclipse a moon. They said it glowed like a second sun when it moved. None of it was confirmed, but in the galaxy, rumors often spread faster than truth. Soon, the whispers reached the central worlds of the Galactic Council, the unofficial hub where hundreds of species met to discuss peace, trade, and exploration. There, the topic of Earth's new creation became impossible to ignore. "We can't allow this to go unchecked," one representative declared. "A species that unstable should not have access to that kind of power." Others disagreed. "Perhaps they're only trying to defend themselves," another said. "We all know humanity has faced aggression before. Maybe this is their way of ensuring survival." But the word survival made many uneasy. In the history of the galaxy, species that built superships often didn't stop there. Power always grew, and peace was always temporary. While the galaxy debated, a few brave explorers tried to get closer. Stealth ships crept toward Sol, cloaked and silent. They expected to find chaos, unfinished machinery, or some kind of military experiment. Instead, they found something that left them speechless. Even from a distance, they could feel the distortion. The space around the shipyard shimmered like heat over a desert. Their instruments flickered, overloaded by the energy fields. What they saw through their viewports was both beautiful and frightening. A massive vessel hanging in space, silent, majestic, almost unreal. It didn't move, didn't attack, didn't broadcast. It just waited, like a sleeping giant. One of the observers recorded a single line before their ship's systems failed. "It's not a weapon. It's something more." The footage was later shown to high councils across multiple star systems. The image of that vast silver shape above Earth spread like a spark through dry grass. Every major civilization began to prepare, not for war, but for the unknown. Back on Earth, the people who worked on the Eidolon Ascendant were unaware of the full extent of the reaction it had caused. They were focused on tests, calibrations, and safety checks. To them, this was still about science, unity, and the human spirit. They didn't realize that in faraway worlds, entire fleets were now changing their positions because of what they had built. Humanity had always dreamed of being noticed among the stars, but no one expected it to happen like this, not through contact or diplomacy, but through fear and fascination. And yet not all alien reactions were negative. On one distant world, a historian looked at the reports and smiled softly. Perhaps, they said, the humans have done what we all forgot how to do, to dream beyond fear. For all their flaws, humans had something rare. They didn't wait for permission to advance. They didn't stop because others said they couldn't. They just built, learned, and reached for more. That spirit, reckless, passionate, and bold, was what made them unpredictable. And now it was shaking the galaxy awake. Across deep space, more probes appeared, more ships were sent to observe. The Council's military forces quietly increased patrols near the edge of human territory. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone was preparing for a future where Earth might no longer be a small player, but a rising power. On Earth itself, the first indirect signs of alien attention began to show. Satellites picked up strange transmissions bouncing off the atmosphere. Space observatories detected faint distortions near the Kuiper Belt. A few scientists whispered what everyone feared to say aloud. They're watching us. But humanity didn't panic. The people leading the project expected this reaction. They had always known that once Eidolon Ascendant powered up, the galaxy would take notice. That was the point. It wasn't built to hide, and it was built to be seen. Late one night, in a quiet observation deck overlooking the ship, one of the senior engineers stood in silence, watching the massive hull glow faintly under Earth's sunlight. A thought came to mind. If they fear us, maybe they'll finally respect us too. The ship wasn't about domination or war. It was about equality, the right to exist without being dismissed. For too long, humanity had been seen as the fragile newcomer in a vast galaxy of ancient powers. The Eidolon was humanity's way of saying, we are here. We belong. And soon the moment of truth would arrive. The final systems were being armed. The launch countdown quietly began. And across the stars, countless eyes watched, waiting for the signal that would change everything. In hidden chambers of alien capitals, leaders whispered nervously, what if it flies? What if it's real? No one knew what would happen when the great ship finally awakened. But one thing was certain, the galaxy would never be the same again. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment, one creation, one act of courage, to turn whispers into thunder. And humanity, for the first time in history, was about to speak in a voice loud enough for the entire universe to hear. The day had finally come. For years, the great ship had waited in silence, floating above Earth like a sleeping giant. Its silver hull gleamed softly under the light of the sun, while deep inside, countless systems hummed quietly, alive but restrained, as if holding its breath. Down below, the people of Earth didn't know the exact time of the launch, but everyone could feel it coming. The air was different. Even the sky seemed more alive, the stars brighter, the nights quieter. Something within every human heart felt connected to what was about to happen. In control centers hidden under mountains and oceans, the final checks were being completed. Screens flickered with lines of data. Engineers whispered softly to one another. Every light on the board slowly turned from red to green. It was happening. After all the years, after all the doubts and sacrifices, the ship was ready. The commander's voice echoed through the communication network. Calm, steady. All systems clear. Begin ignition sequence. Inside the Eidolon Ascendant, lights came alive one after another. Massive engines the size of cities started to hum. Energy flowed through channels that glowed blue and gold. The ship's heart, its strange pulsing core, awakened fully for the first time. The vibration spread through the entire structure like the first heartbeat of a newborn being. At first it was quiet, just a deep rhythmic thrum, but then slowly, the space around the ship began to change. Invisible waves rippled outward, bending light, distorting gravity itself. Satellites nearby started to shake. Instruments all over the solar system began recording strange signals. energy that no one had ever measured before. On Earth, people looked up at the sky and gasped. From certain places, the ship could be seen with the naked eye, a glowing silhouette crossing the sunlight, leaving faint trails of golden shimmer in the atmosphere. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The launch wasn't just a scientific event. It was emotional. It was the moment humanity proved that it could do more than survive. It could rise. When the engines finally engaged, the universe responded. The sound could not be heard, there was no air in space, but the force was felt. Gravitational waves rippled outward like circles in a pond, spreading far beyond the reach of human vision. Those waves would travel for light years, touching sensors, satellites, and observatories across the galaxy. In distant star systems, the effect was immediate. Telescopes flickered, alarms went off, data streams filled with chaos. The readings were unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Energy levels comparable to a star's birth were coming from one small system. All across the galaxy, governments and scientists tried to make sense of it. At first they thought it was a supernova. Then they realized it wasn't. The pulse was artificial. Someone, something, had done this on purpose. And when they tracked the origin, all their maps pointed to one world, Earth. Inside alien research stations, the mood shifted from curiosity to shock. Data kept pouring in. The pulse had disrupted long-range communications, jammed gravitational sensors, and even caused some ships to temporarily lose navigation. Whatever had happened in the Sol system, it was powerful enough to be felt halfway across the spiral arm. On one distant planet, an old scientist watched the readings with trembling hands. "This is not an accident," they said softly. "The humans, they've awakened something new." Back in the solar system, the Eidolon ascendant slowly began to move. The movement was graceful, silent, smooth, like a whale gliding through the deep ocean. Its engines left a trail of faint light that rippled through space. The first destination wasn't another planet, but the edge of Earth's gravitational field. Humanity wanted to see what its creation could truly do, without risk, without conflict, just a test. But the test itself became a message. When the ship accelerated, it didn't use normal thrusters. There was no burst of fire, no explosion of fuel. Instead, the space around it seemed to fold and twist like a curtain being pulled aside. The Eidolon didn't just travel. It shifted. In an instant, it disappeared from its orbit near Earth and reappeared several thousand kilometers away. To anyone watching, it looked like the ship had blinked out of existence and then returned. It was faster than any known propulsion system, faster than even light-based drives used by the oldest races. Every scientist, human and alien, who saw the data that day knew the same thing. Humanity had done the impossible. But the reaction across the galaxy wasn't celebration. It was fear. In the capital world of a powerful alien empire, military leaders gathered urgently. They replayed the sensor data again and again. A gravitational distortion of this magnitude. "From humans?" one asked. "Are we certain of the source?" The answer was always the same. Yes. From Earth. They tried to contact the Galactic Council, demanding an emergency session. Others called for closer inspection of the Sol system. Some even whispered that the ship should be destroyed before it grew stronger. But deep down everyone knew it was already too late. The Eidolon ascendant had already proven itself beyond their reach. Meanwhile, on Earth, the people who had built it watched from screens with tears in their eyes. Many of them had dedicated their entire lives to this one moment. Some had lost families and friends during the decades of work. But as they saw that massive shape drift peacefully among the stars, every sacrifice felt worth it. The commander's voice came through again, steady but full of emotion. "Stabilization complete. Systems running perfectly. The ship is holding." Applause erupted through every control room. But even amid the celebration, there was silence, a kind of respectful, overwhelmed silence. Everyone realized that humanity had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The Eidolon ascendant was no longer a secret. Its existence, its power, its presence, all of it would change how the universe looked at humanity forever. As the ship began transmitting low-frequency test signals, the galaxy listened. It wasn't a message of aggression. It wasn't a threat. It was simply a wave, a pulse that said, "We are here." But that quiet declaration carried more weight than any weapon ever built. Because for the first time, the universe had to take humans seriously. In alien command centers, some looked upon the readings with admiration, others with fear, a few even with respect. But all shared one thought: the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. Back on the ship, the crew worked carefully, monitoring energy output, adjusting stabilizers, recording data. Outside, the stars shimmered in the ship's light. It was like watching dawn break across the universe. Then something unexpected happened. Sensors aboard the Eidolon picked up faint signals approaching from the outer solar boundary. Multiple objects moving fast. They weren't meteors. They were ships, unknown, unmarked, but clearly not human. No one on the crew panicked. They had prepared for this possibility. Humanity had expected the galaxy to react. And now it had. The approaching ships stayed at a distance, scanning silently. Their bright hulls reflected sunlight as they held position just beyond range. They didn't attack. They didn't communicate. They only watched. In the command deck, the crew exchanged quiet glances. The commander gave a single instruction: hold position. Do not engage. The Eidolon's shields remained active, its systems steady. The observers didn't know it, but even at idle power, the ship could disable any vessel that came too close. Yet no one wanted a war. Not now, not ever. Humanity's purpose was not domination. It was to prove existence, to be seen. For several long hours, the two sides watched each other in silence. Then slowly the alien ships began to retreat. Whatever they had seen was enough. They left without a word. The universe had received its first warning, not through weapons or threats, but through awe. Back on Earth, the event was classified as the day the heavens trembled. The data from that launch would be studied for generations. Physicists would call it the greatest leap in human history. But for ordinary people, it meant something simpler: pride. For the first time, they felt that humanity had truly reached the stars. In the days that followed, the galaxy buzzed with reactions. News networks on distant worlds replayed the energy readings. Debates filled their councils. Some called the Eidolon a miracle. Others called it a monster. But no matter what they called it, no one could ignore it. And somewhere in the depths of space, the ship drifted quietly, watching, learning, waiting. It carried no banner, no army, only a message carved deep into its heart. Humanity will rise in peace, but never in silence. That message, unspoken but understood, spread across the stars like a fire through darkness. For the first time, the galaxy looked toward Earth not as a curiosity, but as an equal. And the heavens, for the first time, truly trembled. The galaxy was no longer calm. Ever since the Eidolon ascendant awakened and sent waves across the stars, silence had turned into fear. Messages rushed between star systems. Military councils met in secret, and fleets quietly changed their routes. Everywhere, one question echoed: what are the humans planning? The galaxy had seen powerful ships before, vessels built by civilizations thousands of years older than Earth. But this one was different. It was built not by ancient gods or advanced empires, but by a young, unpredictable species that had once been considered too emotional to survive among the stars. To many alien leaders, that was what made humanity dangerous. They were too new, too passionate, too stubborn, and now they possessed something that could not be ignored. Weeks passed after the Eidolon's first test flight. Humanity said nothing. The ship remained near Earth, calm and silent, while the world below watched with pride and uncertainty. The people knew they had built something extraordinary, but they also knew the galaxy was watching back, and not all eyes were friendly. Far away, in the halls of the Galactic Council, arguments broke out every day. Representatives from dozens of worlds demanded action. "We cannot allow this level of power in the hands of such a young species," one declared. "If they cannot control it, it will destroy us all." Others tried to calm the fear. "Maybe it's only for defense," said another. "Humans have faced many threats before. Perhaps this ship is their way of saying enough." But fear has its own voice. And in the end, fear won. A coalition of 6 powerful empires decided to act. They announced it quietly, without public declaration. Officially, it was called a peaceful observation mission. Unofficially, it was a show of force. Within days, hundreds of warships gathered near the edge of human space, far beyond Pluto's orbit. Their combined fleet was the largest formation assembled in decades. Each ship carried weapons capable of wiping out moons. Together, they represented almost half the galaxy's military might. Their message was simple. We come to verify the purpose of your creation. Open your ship for inspection, or face isolation from the interstellar community. The message was broadcast in dozens of languages and frequencies. Humanity received it clearly. Inside Earth's main communication hub, the message played on a large screen. No one spoke for a long time. The room was filled with silence and heavy, uncertain. The faces watching knew what was happening. The galaxy didn't trust them. The same pattern humanity had seen on its own planet, fear of the unknown, control through strength, was repeating again, only on a cosmic scale. Finally, the answer was sent back, calm, firm, and simple. The Eidolon Ascendant is a vessel of peace. We welcome dialogue, not inspection. No foreign forces permitted to enter human space without consent. It was a polite way of saying no, but the coalition didn't take no easily. They saw the refusal as defiance. Within hours, their fleets crossed into the outer edge of the solar system, their engines glowing like a storm of suns. Humanity didn't move. The Eidolon remained motionless above Earth, quiet, graceful, almost peaceful, like a lion that refuses to roar until it must. Every human on Earth watched the skies that night. Broadcasts showed glowing dots moving slowly toward the planet, distant, silent but unmistakable. It felt like history was holding its breath again. The coalition ship stopped at the Kuiper Belt. From there, they sent another message. We request immediate compliance. Lower your defenses or we will proceed. The Eidolon Ascendant finally moved. At first, it was only a shift, slow, deliberate. The massive ship rotated gracefully, turning to face the incoming fleet. Its hull caught sunlight and reflected it in waves glowing like molten silver. Then a deep vibration filled the void. The ship's energy core began to rise in power, sending faint ripples through nearby space. No weapon systems activated. No threats were made. The ship simply stood there, unyielding, silent, alive. On the command deck, the crew remained calm. They had known this day might come. The commander gave a quiet order, voice steady. Activate the defensive field. Do not engage. And with that, the Eidolon responded in a way no one had ever seen before. A pulse of light expanded from its core, invisible to the eye, but strong enough to be felt across space. Every alien ship within 300 kilometers froze. Their engines stopped. Their weapons shut down. Communication systems went dead. One by one, their lights flickered out, leaving them drifting helplessly. It wasn't destruction. It wasn't violence. It was control, and precise and merciful. The Eidolon could have destroyed them all in seconds, but it didn't. Instead, it simply showed what it could do. Inside the disabled ships, confusion turned into shock. Engineers tried to restart systems. Nothing worked. Even backup power refused to activate. The Eidolon's field had neutralized every artificial system within range, without a single shot fired. A few minutes later, the pulse faded. The ship slowly regained power, but their crews no longer had any doubt. They had witnessed something beyond comprehension, a force that could disarm an entire fleet without harm. The coalition's leaders immediately ordered retreat. None of them dared provoke another response. Within hours, the entire fleet began to pull back, silent and shaken. No message was sent from Earth this time. None was needed. The silence said enough. Across the galaxy, the story spread like wildfire. Every civilization received fragments of the event, sensor data, energy readings, and intercepted communications. The numbers were unbelievable. Some scientists refused to believe them. Others couldn't stop trembling. For centuries, the galaxy had been ruled by a balance of power, ancient empires keeping younger ones in check. But now, a young world had shattered that balance without a single act of war. The reactions were mixed. Some called Earth a threat. Others called it a miracle. Some feared a new empire would rise. Others hoped humanity would become the voice of change, the civilization that might finally end the endless cycles of control and fear. Back on Earth, there was no celebration. The people didn't cheer or dance. They simply stood together, proud but solemn. They hadn't built the Eidolon to intimidate anyone. They had built it to protect what mattered, their right to exist, to dream, to grow without being crushed by fear. In classrooms, teachers told their students, "Remember this day. We didn't win through violence. We won through wisdom." On the ship itself, the crew looked out at the stars in silence. Some of them smiled softly. Others simply breathed with relief. They knew what they had proven, not just to the galaxy but to themselves. Humanity didn't need to be the strongest to be respected. It only needed to be wise enough to stand its ground. Far away, the Galactic Council met again. This time there was no shouting, no accusations, only quiet acceptance. They knew the truth. Humanity had joined the great stage of the stars, not as a follower but as an equal. And in the private chambers of the oldest empire, a historian wrote a single line into the galactic record. On this day, the universe learned a lesson, that power without purpose is fear, but purpose with restraint is strength. The Eidolon Ascendant continued its quiet orbit above Earth, like a guardian watching over its home. It didn't fire a weapon, yet it had changed the fate of entire civilizations. Down below, people went back to their lives, but something inside every heart felt different. The stars no longer seemed unreachable. Humanity had touched the heavens, and the heavens had felt it. For the first time in history, no one looked at Earth as weak. And for the first time, humanity didn't feel small. The galaxy's message to itself was simple: do not test the patience of those who seek peace. And humanity's silent answer, written across the stars, was even simpler: we are here, and we will stand. The Eidolon Ascendant became a symbol, not of war but of balance, proof that peace can carry power, that calm can command respect, and that even a young world can make the heavens tremble without breaking them. The universe would remember that moment forever. The day when thousands of alien ships faced one human vessel and realized that true strength was not in destruction, but in restraint. That day, the stars learned what humanity had become, and humanity finally learned what it was always meant to be. For weeks after the confrontation, the galaxy couldn't stop talking about what had happened. Every broadcast, every star network, and every local channel was filled with one topic: the Eidolon Ascendant. What the humans had done seemed impossible. They hadn't fired a single weapon. They hadn't destroyed anything. Yet they had stopped an entire armada of some of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, and done it in a way that no one could fully understand. To some, it was a miracle. To others, it was terrifying. In the great markets of the outer colonies, people gathered around holographic screens showing replays of the event. The same scene repeated again and again: the alien ships entering human space, the light spreading from the Eidolon, the silence that followed. Traders who had once mocked Earth now whispered about its wisdom. Children from distant planets played games pretending to be the peace ship from the blue world. But in the darker corners of the universe, fear was growing fast. Admirals and rulers who had built their power through control and intimidation now felt a new kind of threat, not from weapons, but from an idea. Humanity had shown that restraint could be stronger than fear, and that frightened those who depended on fear to rule. Secret meetings began once again across the galaxy. Some wanted to attack Earth before it grew even stronger. Others wanted to ally with it, hoping to share its technology. But no one knew how to approach a species that had just humbled half the galaxy with a single gesture of calm. Inside the Eidolon Ascendant, life had returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be. The crew spent long hours monitoring space, repairing minor systems, and reviewing the event over and over. Many still couldn't believe they had faced a fleet that large and come out untouched. When one of the engineers looked out the observation deck window, she could still see the faint trail of the energy pulse that had stretched across the void. It reminded her of a ripple across a calm ocean. She whispered quietly to herself, "The wave that changed everything." Earth itself was still trying to understand what it had done. Governments received messages from thousands of alien worlds. Some were congratulations, some were apologies, and some were silent transmissions filled only with coordinates, a quiet request for contact. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't reaching out to be heard. Others were reaching out to them. People across Earth felt a strange new mix of pride and responsibility. They had dreamed for centuries about being part of the galactic community, but they had never imagined they would become its center. Schools taught lessons about diplomacy and peacekeeping instead of just science and math. Even children began to speak about unity, saying things like, if Earth can calm the stars, maybe we can calm each other too. But not everyone felt at peace. Some feared that the galaxy would eventually come back, stronger and angrier. Others questioned whether the Eidolon's power was too much for any civilization to control. A few even protested outside research stations, holding signs that said, "Peace through strength can turn into fear through pride." Still, most people trusted the team who had built the ship. They had seen how it was used, not to conquer but to protect. Meanwhile, in distant corners of space, rumors began to spread that the Eidolon wasn't just a machine. Some believed it was alive, a kind of sentient being bonded with humanity itself. Others thought it contained something older, a hidden intelligence guiding its actions. No one could prove anything, but the mystery only made the legend grow stronger. Galactic historians called it the Day of Light. Every species interpreted it differently. The Andron Collective called it the Gentle War. The Stellar Archives named it the Silence of Fire. On some planets, poets wrote about it as if it were a spiritual event, the moment when violence lost its voice and peace learned to speak. For the first time, many civilizations began to question their own weapons, their own wars. Some empires paused their expansions. Others began to seek treaties with rivals they had hated for generations. They said, if humans can stop a fleet without killing anyone, why can't we stop fighting? And so, without even trying, Earth began to reshape the galaxy. In one of the farthest outposts, a small mining colony orbiting a red dwarf star, a young operator received an unexpected signal. It wasn't from any known fleet or planet. It carried no message, only a pulse, rhythmic, steady, echoing the same energy pattern the Eidolon had released weeks ago. When scientists on Earth examined it, they discovered it was a reflection, a delayed echo from a region far beyond the known galaxy. It meant that the wave of energy from the Eidolon hadn't just stopped the fleet, it had kept traveling endlessly, touching the edges of deep space. Some said it was only science, an effect of the energy burst. Others said it was symbolic, humanity's voice reaching beyond the stars. The idea that their message of restraint could travel across the universe gave humanity new purpose. Research centers focused on long-distance communication, hoping to learn whether someone or something might respond. But there were others watching quietly. Deep within the Galactic Council's secret archives, ancient records were reopened. They spoke of a time long ago when another species had built something similar, a ship that could bend energy, silence weapons, and control conflict. That civilization had vanished mysteriously, leaving only fragments of data behind. Now, some wondered if humanity had rediscovered what was lost, or if something greater had chosen them to carry it forward. Still, the humans didn't seek to rule or command. They only wanted to protect their place among the stars. Every decision made on Earth was cautious, every message carefully worded. They had seen how easily power could create fear, and they refused to repeat history. One evening, as the Eidolon passed above the curve of the Earth, its hull reflecting the blue glow of the oceans below, the commander stood near the viewing glass. Below him, cities shimmered like constellations. He thought about how far humanity had come, from fragile explorers to guardians of peace. He knew, however, that peace would not last forever. The galaxy was too large, too unpredictable. Somewhere out there, new threats were already rising. But he also knew that humanity would face them differently now. Not with panic, but with understanding. And perhaps that was enough. Months passed. The fear that once gripped the stars began to fade. Trade routes reopened. Diplomats from distant worlds started arriving on Earth, requesting tours of the Eidolon Ascendant. Each visitor was greeted warmly, but none were allowed inside the ship's core. Humanity had learned to share its values, not its weapons. Every visiting leader left Earth with the same impression. This young species was not arrogant, not reckless. It was strong because it had chosen not to be cruel. As time went on, the Eidolon became more than a ship. It became a symbol on banners, a story told to children across galaxies. Statues were built on other worlds showing its glowing form spreading waves of light. Pilots named their vessels after it. Even in the quiet corners of forgotten moons, travelers whispered stories about the human ship that made the stars listen. The waves from that one event still moved across the heavens, not just as energy, but as hope. And yet among all the admiration and peace, there remained a quiet question in the minds of many. If the Eidolon could calm war, what would it do if war returned? Would it remain gentle or would it be forced to roar? No one wanted to find out. So the galaxy changed, cautiously, slowly, but deeply. Empires began to invest more in peacekeeping than conquest. Old enemies met under neutral banners. And somewhere on the edge of known space, a new kind of council began to form, one that invited not just the old empires, but also the young ones, including Earth. When humanity joined, they didn't arrive with soldiers or fleets. They arrived with a single envoy, carrying a message that would later be quoted for generations. We have built something powerful, yes, but the real power is not in the ship. It's in the choice not to use it. The galaxy listened. Some believed. Others doubted, but everyone remembered. And as the Eidolon Ascendant continued its silent watch above Earth, it became a quiet reminder that even in the vastness of the cosmos, one choice, one act of calm, could reshape everything. The heavens would never forget that day, and neither would humanity. The light that spread from Earth's greatest ship didn't fade with distance. It lived in every world that chose peace over fear, understanding over dominance. It was more than a moment in time. It was the start of a new era. Years had passed since the day the Eidolon Ascendant sent that great wave across the stars. The memory of it had never faded. It had changed not only the galaxy's politics, but its heart. For the first time in thousands of years, entire worlds began to slow down their endless race for power. Empires that had once armed themselves with moon-sized weapons now sent envoys instead of fleets. People who had never even heard of Earth spoke of it with quiet respect, the small blue world that made the heavens pause. On Earth itself, life had become strangely peaceful. There were no more sky-high defense budgets or panicked warnings on news screens. Instead, there were conferences about communication, education, and healing the planet. The same energy once used to build weapons was now used to rebuild oceans and forests. Every city had a small monument, a silver curve shaped like a wave, reminding everyone of what calm power could do. The Eidolon Ascendant still circled high above, glowing faintly like a second moon. Most nights people could look up and see it pass silently over them, steady and patient. To many it felt like a guardian. To others, a teacher. To everyone, it was a reminder of choice, that humanity could be powerful without being cruel. Inside the ship, its crew had changed several times. New officers had replaced old ones, and the young had grown up with the story of the ship as their inspiration. But one thing had never changed, its purpose. The Eidolon remained a symbol of protection and peace, never aggression. One quiet morning, the commander on duty received a transmission from deep space. The signal was faint, old, and repeating. At first, the technicians thought it was only background noise, the echo of the Eidolon's own wave traveling through distant space. But as they decoded it, the pattern became clear. It was a reply, no one knew from where. The coordinates pointed beyond the charted regions, past every known star. The message was simple, not words, but rhythm, a calm pulse echoing the same gentle tone that the Eidolon had once released. The news reached Earth within hours. The world listened as scientists played the signal through loudspeakers. It sounded almost like a heartbeat, steady and peaceful. People stopped in the streets to listen. Children held their parents' hands. For the first time, humanity felt something even larger than pride: connection. The signal meant that the wave had reached someone. Somewhere far beyond what anyone had imagined, another mind had heard humanity's act of restraint. It hadn't responded with fear or anger, but with harmony. The World Council gathered in a calm hall built of glass and white stone. No one raised their voice. They all knew what this meant. Humanity was not alone, and it was no longer seen as a threat, but as a voice worth hearing. The commander of the Eidolon spoke through the screen. "Perhaps," he said softly, "the wave we sent was never about defense. Maybe it was an invitation." After long discussion, they agreed on one thing. The Eidolon Ascendant would travel. Not for war, not for expansion, but for discovery. It would follow the pulse to its source. When the day came for launch, millions gathered across continents to watch. From spaceports, beaches, and city rooftops, people looked up as the great ship's engines awakened once again. A quiet vibration filled the air. The oceans shimmered as light rippled through the clouds. Then, without thunder or explosion, the Eidolon rose higher, gliding silently beyond the atmosphere. For a moment it hung between day and night, half in sunlight, half in shadow, and then it vanished into the black, following the rhythm calling from beyond the stars. The journey lasted months. The crew recorded strange phenomena, currents of energy, fragments of forgotten civilizations, silent worlds orbiting cold suns. Everywhere they went, they felt the same gentle resonance, as if the universe itself remembered that wave from years ago. One night, as the ship crossed the edge of known space, the commander stood before the observation window. Ahead of him stretched a glowing field of light. Not stars, but something different, like the reflection of a billion small ripples on water. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the message. He whispered, "It's beautiful." Sensors confirmed it wasn't a fleet, nor a planet. It was a vast network of energy, ancient, intelligent, and alive. As the Eidolon approached, the ship's systems responded automatically. The lights dimmed and a soft voice filled the control deck. Not human, not mechanical, something in between. "Your wave has reached us," it said gently. "We heard your calm." No one spoke for several seconds. The crew stared at one another, hearts racing. Then the voice continued. "Long before your kind were born, others tried to silence war. They failed because they sought peace through control. But you sought peace through choice. We honor that." The commander, still stunned, managed to reply. "Who are you?" "We are the Echo," the voice said. "The memory of those who came before. When your wave reached us, we knew another civilization had learned what we once learned, that true strength is quiet." The ship's core hummed softly. Lights across the deck formed patterns like flowing water. Every crew member felt it. Not fear, not command, but welcome. The voice spoke again. "We will teach you what was lost. If you promise to remember why you built your ship, not for rule, but for balance," the commander nodded slowly. "I promise." And so the Eidolon ascendant drifted into the field of light. Records from that moment showed a radiant burst, not destructive, but transforming. The ship's surface shimmered, its silver hull reflecting shapes and patterns unseen before. Then for a while, all signals from the Eidolon disappeared. Weeks later, transmissions returned, calm, steady, filled with new data about energy, harmony, and the nature of space itself. The Eidolon had not vanished. It had evolved. It had become part of something larger, a bridge between humanity and the deeper universe. Back on Earth, people listened in awe as the first message arrived. "We have found those who came before. They were never gods or conquerors. They were guardians of balance. They welcome us as equals. There were no fireworks, no parades, only quiet tears and soft smiles. For humanity had done something no empire had ever achieved. It had earned respect not through dominance, but through understanding. Generations later, children would still learn about the ship and the day it left. They would study how one act of restraint had echoed across galaxies and drawn forth ancient wisdom. Historians would write that this was the true beginning of humanity's age among the stars. Not the day they built their greatest ship, but the day they proved they could be gentle. As the years went on, new vessels were built following the Eidolon's design. Not warships, but peacecrafts traveling between worlds, resolving conflicts before they began. Wherever they went, they carried the same message written on their hulls. Strength is calm. And high above Earth, in the quiet night, if you looked long enough, you could sometimes see a faint shimmer moving across the stars. The original Eidolon ascendant, still journeying with the Echo, sending waves of harmony through the endless dark. The heavens were no longer divided. They had learned to breathe together. And it all began with a single ship from a small blue world, a ship that refused to fight, and instead taught the universe to listen.